from the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's time for FLA Law, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are back with FLA Law live on the radio. Thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully you know who we are. We are the personal injury attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, and we come to you live every Tuesday at 5 o'clock with our legal call-in talk show. And hopefully you've been a faithful listener, but if not, if this is your first time, then you're in for a treat because we have a special guest with us. And she has been on the show, I think, at least twice before. And she's been back after a while to come talk to you about bankruptcy. Specifically, we'll be talking a lot about business bankruptcy. So this is a great show. And so if you're tuning in and you know someone who owns a business, family, friend, relative, small business owners, or just have bankruptcy questions in general, now is the time to tell them to tune in. Have them turn on the radio, have them jump on Facebook, YouTube, listen, like, share, because this is going to be a great show. And I'll definitely turn it over to my co-host / guest to introduce herself in just a moment. But while you're getting your family members and friends all gathered around the radio, this is how you can call in tonight if you have any questions for us, because as I said, this is a live legal call-in talk show. So the number is 727-441-3000. Again, it's 727-441-3000. And that's going to be the best way to call in if you want to ask your question live on the air. However, if you're a bit shy, you don't really want to talk on the air, but you do want to have your question answered, you can go to one of our live streams. We are streaming live on YouTube right now, and we're streaming live on Facebook. So if you can search us on Facebook or YouTube, it's the same name. It's Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes, Perenich. If you look, you should see like a live red circle around our logo. It should say FLA Law, live on the radio. That's the broadcast. Click on it. In the comment section, you can actually type your question in right there. If you have a comment for us, a statement, question, just want to chime in on what we're talking about, feel free to do that, and I will actually read it out live on the air, and my guest and I will go ahead and try to tackle it. If it is something that she can assist with, of course, she'll give you the info on how you can reach her or find her after the broadcast is over. So with that being said, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Faher. I am one of those rare breeds of people who were actually born and raised in St. Pete. So this is my home. So I'm really lucky to practice here. I own Faher Law, and we handle specifically business and family law cases. We do a lot of crossover work. So if you have a bankruptcy case with some family law issues, or a family law case with some bankruptcy issues, those things are kind of really in my wheelhouse. I'm here today to specifically focus on business bankruptcies and kind of what I've been seeing around the world. So I've been practicing here in Pinellas. It'll be 17 years in April. So I'm really excited and happy to be here to share what I know with you all.
Right. And so sometimes we get talking and we run out of time towards the end. So I do want to give people a chance right now while we're still, getting into the conversation. If you could just give your contact information. So just in case you have a question or a follow-up and you want to be able to reach out to Christina at Faher Law about your specific issue or your business issue, go ahead and give them that information now, just in case we get to go on at the end and we don't get it in.
Fantastic. So the best number to reach our office is 727-359-0367. That's how you can connect with Faher Law directly. We're also on Facebook. We have a website, faherlaw.com. You can connect with us there. You can read our blog articles, which have a ton of information. You can request a consult right from the website directly. You can also find our YouTube channel. We're on LinkedIn, and you can even find us on Pinterest.
Awesome. And so at the end of the show, we'll try to give that all to you again. But of course, if you have a question, now is actually the best time to go ahead and call because you can have the benefit of talking to her tonight. The number again is 727-441-3000. The lines are open. And the good thing about having guests who come in and talk about other areas of law is it actually is educating for me as an attorney who really has only practiced in one area of law my entire career. And I would say I'm very specialized at this point. And so my brain can only compute personal injury and civil litigation in that type of regard. Of course, I do workers' comp and Social Security as well. But I love having guests come on and talk about family law and bankruptcy and all the things that I don't do. And so I was so happy when you said that you would be able to join me again, because this is a great topic. And I don't think that I know a lot about it. And so that I would hope that maybe our listeners are going to learn a lot tonight as well. So first and foremost, I know that we're in a very difficult time coming out of a very bad hurricane season. Our businesses here locally are probably struggling more than what we might like to see, especially on our coastline. And so I thought this is actually a very timely topic to talk about business bankruptcy. And more specifically, we'll be getting into the EIDL loans, which is basically the economic impact disaster loans, right, from
Yes.
the SBA. So guys, tune in, get your folks that have businesses, because this is actually going to be really informative. Now, in your opinion, what are some of the most common reasons businesses will file for bankruptcy?
So the businesses file bankruptcy because they're really feeling the pinch of their debt payments. So whether that is the merchant cash advances that they've been getting, whether that's a specific loan they took out, whether it's the SBA's EIDL loans, there's a payment that is just really making it difficult for the business to operate at a healthy standpoint. Maybe they're not allowed to, maybe they're not able to make payroll. Maybe it's affecting other aspects of the business. That's really when people come to see me. They're feeling that pinch from a debt payment.
Right. And they're not really sure how they're going to kind of get over that hump, right?
Correct.
So then have you seen more of that here lately with the major hurricanes that we just experienced in October-ish? I feel like it was a century ago, but it was not that long ago.
It feels like a long time ago, but I can tell you a lot of our businesses are still feeling the impact. And so maybe they were a business that didn't have insurance.
Right.
Maybe they were a business that had insurance, but it wasn't enough. And so there are still obligations that they have to pay regardless of the fact that we had a hurricane. So we saw a little bit of a pause. So maybe October, November, December, maybe your mortgage company, maybe your landlord gave you a little bit of a break, but that break came up and is now past. And so come January and February, we're now seeing that we need to pick up those payments, and people are realizing the income isn't there.
Right.
And so now they're trying to figure out, what are our options? What do we do? That's kind of where I step in.
Well, tell me about that before we get into the specific topic regarding some of these loans. What are the business's options, and what can they do when they are feeling like it's that pinch? It's getting to that point where I can't pay my employees or keep the doors open. What are the options there?
What are my options? Great question. I feel like I answer this 82 times a week, but that's why I'm here, because people just
where you come in.
Don't know, right? And so like you said, Jacqueline, I only practice this area of law. So I only have certain tools in my toolbox. And so when we talk about business bankruptcies, there are two. We have a Chapter 7 liquidation, or we have a Chapter 11 reorganization. And those are really the only two tools in my toolbox, but they're really different. So in a Chapter 7, you take the keys, you hand them over, you walk away from the business, and it's done.
Gotcha.
The bankruptcy court will bring in a trustee. We're going to liquidate everything. We're going to sell what you have, pay as many of our creditors you can, and then you kind of ride off into the sunset, or maybe onto your next venture.
Sure.
In a Chapter 11, that's where you're going to fight tooth and nail to reorganize the debt. So we're going to come up with a repayment plan based on gross revenue projections of what's going to come forward, as well as what are some of our normal expenses. We need insurance, we have to pay rent, we've got to make payroll. What does that look like? All of those things. And then we're going to use whatever leftover money is there to make a repayment plan. We're going to spend 5 years reorganizing and then come out of bankruptcy still a viable and hopefully leaner, meaner, profitable business.
Right. Well, that actually is a great question, brings up a question in my mind. Why would anyone want to reorganize when they can just ride off into the sunset, as you said, and just start over, start a new thing, a new business or a new name, as opposed to doing the hard work and doing the reorganization, which sounds like to me a little bit more challenging than maybe the liquidation aspect of it.
Sure. So reorganization is really great for businesses that maybe tried a new venture. So for example, maybe you're a spa and you got a new piece of equipment, and that equipment has a really high payment because you're financing it. And maybe you're not bringing in as many customers for that new equipment. And so the rest of your business is viable, but for maybe this one thing that didn't work out.
Gotcha.
And I've seen that in gyms, doctors' offices, spas. There are different kinds of things like that that could be just that one thing you tried that didn't work, but the rest of the business is still viable.
Right.
A lot of times people have put blood, sweat, tears, time, years into these businesses, and they may not be ready to let it go.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why having a consultation with a business bankruptcy attorney is great, because we can talk about these two options. They sound like night and day, and they are, but it's important to think about, am I ready to ride off into the sunset? Or do I really want to, and kind of what I advise my clients, tighten that belt buckle, get really lean and mean on our expenses and our income, and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah. Are you seeing any particular trends with some of the businesses right now that are trying to recover from the hurricanes as far as what is maybe happening out on the beaches? Do you have any comment on that?
So I grew up on St. Pete Beach, so we can definitely see that the residents are coming back quicker.
That's good.
The people are coming back. They're working on building back. The businesses are much slower, and they have much more dire, very stark choices also, right? Especially if you're a business renting space, what happens to your business depends a lot on what your landlord's going to do. If your landlord hasn't made a decision, if your landlord doesn't have insurance, all of those things affect you whether you want them to or not.
Right.
So that's what we're seeing with a lot is the businesses on the beaches are slower, but those that are coming back are really scrapping. And I'm seeing a lot of, especially my community, come out and support those businesses. And that's a great thing to see.
Good. Because I was concerned because on the residential side, I had been hearing about people that are just like, we'd rather just get out from under this and get away and ride in the proverbial sunset.
Yes.
And I don't want to deal with rebuilding, don't have adequate insurance, and they just sell.
And it's frustrating. It's frustrating having to deal with insurance and contractors and permitting. And that does make people less, that we now have to think about it a lot harder if this is worth the fight, or we're just going to keep riding off into the sunset, Jacqueline.
We're going to keep doing it.
Yes.
So then what we really want to talk about, and I wanted to see how this may play in, if it does at all, is what you informed me off the air is about the SBA now coming back and I guess calling in these EIDL loans. And are these loans that businesses were able to get because of disasters or those kinds of things? And if so, why are they now coming in and wanting to collect on these?
So the economic impact disaster loans really kind of started back in COVID time. I know that feels now a million years ago compared to the hurricane time, right? We're having different eras now. But that's where those loans came from. And so the economic impact disaster loans, or the EIDL loans, were in repayment kind of starting around February of 2022, 2023. So some people had been paying on those,
Mhm.
and that was kind of going along and going along. And then the hurricanes came. And then we got a little bit of a reprieve from September to December. And now in January, those payments have restarted.
Time to pay up. Yeah.
And so that kind of now we start to look at, right? We've had a holiday season, we've had a hurricane season, maybe we're dealing with our homes. There's just not enough money to always go around. So now people are really trying to make the difficult decision. Am I going to pay payroll?
Yeah.
Or am I going to pay the SBA?
Right.
And that brings them to my office to say, can I do both? How do I do both? What are my other options?
Right. And so then I guess that's the next question then, because even me as a personal individual, I'll log into like my credit card account or my car loan and it'll have a pop-up. We see that you're in an area that has been impacted by a disaster of some kind. Fortunately, I was not one that was heavily impacted by the storms, but it made me wonder, what does that necessarily mean? Are you saying that with these loans, they only gave that small bit of reprieve, only those kind of 2-month period?
2 to 4 months on average is what we saw from the hurricanes. Mm-hmm. So if you were impacted by Helene, that took place, August, September. So then you would get September, October, November, December off. And then Milton, we usually saw October, November, December. Right. So in the eyes of many creditors, that should have been enough time for us to all regroup and get back on our horse. But that is not necessarily the case when we see so many homes and businesses not yet rebuilt. Right. And all these people are still dealing with insurance and permitting and all of that. So a lot of my potential clients who are coming in to speak with me are feeling the crunch from a lot of places.
Yes. From all different areas.
Yes.
I gotcha. So then what happens if they're coming to you now and they realize that they can't pay this EIDL loan back or some other SBA loan that they might have gotten? What are their options then if they can't do it?
So my 2 toolboxes obviously are, hey, let's talk about shutting the business down, you walking away and riding off into the sunset. Or
that would be the Chapter 7.
That would be the Chapter 7. Mm-hmm. Or do we do the Chapter 11 and say, okay, let's reorganize? Mm-hmm. Those aren't always the only options. So people also talk then about, well, can I go to the SBA and negotiate directly?
Yeah.
So that could be a potential opportunity. But there are things we need to consider when we're doing that. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of attorneys will handle SBA negotiations for you. I do a lot of great things with businesses, but my tool house is inside bankruptcy. Okay. So I will negotiate with the SBA if you are in bankruptcy, but not if you are not in there. So that's kind of a weird little niche of things of, can you negotiate directly with them? Most creditors are going to want a lump sum payment. So if you don't have the $867 for your monthly payment, you're not going to have a big chunk to settle your $75,000 or larger SBA loan. So that's why debt negotiation or settlement isn't always the best option.
Right.
So that is something I always warn people about, is if you had the money to make the payments, then you'd be okay. But if you don't have the money to make the payment, chances are you don't have the money to make a lump sum settlement.
Negotiate. Yeah. So then what other options? So not having a whole lot of knowledge about the structure of these loans, are there other options other than negotiating, like a forgiveness application or a forbearance or deferral, those sorts of things?
So we're not seeing a lot of forgiveness. And the tricky part that some business owners got into, for maybe good reason, maybe not, is the Paycheck Protection Program loans. Yeah. They were forgiven. And the SBA told us, hey, they're going to be forgiven. You're going to be fine. And then they said the EIDL loans were not going to be forgiven. And I think some of us just kind of crossed our fingers and said, well, maybe they will be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not.
They're
We
sticking to their
haven't,
guns
yep,
on
we haven't seen any forgiveness coming out from the EIDL loans. So that's not necessarily an option. I think if you did attempt some type of forbearance or deferment based on the hurricanes, I think that you might be able to get a little bit more time, but I really think 6 months would be the max. They're going to want to see that the business recovers and is able to make these payments, or otherwise they're going to start collection activities.
Whew, okay. And so,
not fun.
Yeah. And so obviously that's always the thought in my mind as well. If you can't pay it, usually there's some sort of parameter there. You can apply for a forbearance or deferment or furlough, whatever you can think of. But it sounds like not a lot of those options exist with these kinds of loans.
And it's not going to be long term.
Yeah.
That's the hard part is, the SBA put this money out. Now they want to see the money coming back in. And especially if you're one of those businesses who received it from COVID and you got it in 2021, we're now 4 or 5 years down the road. So the SBA is getting a little antsy looking for their money.
Yeah. And so that's a good point. So these loans, let's say they were taken out in 2020 or so. So it's been quite a few years now. And now they're coming to the table with, I can't pay you. Yeah. Does that then risk that business being audited to determine what's been going on here?
Right. So we're seeing that both inside of bankruptcy and outside of bankruptcy. Certainly, I see it more often in the bankruptcy because that's my wheelhouse. That's kind of where I see things. And so with the dischargeability of the SBA loans, they're unsecured loans for the most part. So you didn't have to put collateral down. If you did have to put collateral down, then now we have a little bit bigger of a concern as to what the collateral is. Are you keeping that collateral? But in cases where it's unsecured, you didn't put collateral down for the loan, in order to discharge it, the SBA is allowed to ask you, what did you do with that money? And we need to have good answers. And in addition to having good answers, we need to have the paperwork to prove it.
And you need the receipts.
That paper trail. I know, lawyers, why do we love paperwork so much? Because sometimes it saves our heinies.
It matters. Yeah.
It does. And so the SBA really wants to see, where did you put it? Did you put it into your payroll account? Was the money used for payroll? Was it used to maybe remodel the business? Was it used to, back in COVID days, was it used to disinfect, put up security barriers, put up the plastic shields and those sorts of things? Yeah. So the SBA is entitled to see what you did with their money.
Right.
If you don't have those legitimate answers, that could now either be considered fraud, or it could be considered non-dischargeable in your bankruptcy case, making the entire bankruptcy pointless.
I was going to say, then why are we doing this?
Right. Or it could impose bankruptcy fines, penalties. You could go to jail.
Yeah.
So there are much bigger concerns than just, what did you do with the money?
Yeah. And so when you say paper trail, what exactly the kind of documents and things that you find to be, okay, this helps, this works, these are kinds of things that you're going to need to show to prove what you did with the funds?
Bank statements are a great place to start. I want to see, where did the money go into the bank account? And then where were those deductions? For businesses who have one bank account, thank you to those businesses. You have the one bank account, money goes in, money goes out. It says payroll. It's very easy. When you're making transfers between multiple accounts, now we have to do a little bit more paper tracing. In certain cases, maybe we need to get an accountant involved. It can become a big problem if there's been a lot of money shifting. Obviously, if you took the money and then paid yourself back for the money you loaned the business, that could be considered problematic. So
it's tricky.
A lot of figuring out what was that line item for is something that we should all be taking a look at now to make sure we spent the money correctly. And I think bank statements is the perfect place to start.
Good. So I know obviously you mentioned if you were attempting to potentially have those loans discharged, then an audit could occur. But are there other ways that an audit could be triggered? Is it simply by just maybe missed a few payments? Could that trigger it?
I think it's very similar to how the IRS does audits, right? That we kind of don't know who's subject to an audit, but I'm sure if we read the fine print, and I feel like only lawyers do that, Jacqueline, on the fine print, it does say that they are able to audit your paperwork and your records to make sure that the funds were used in the appropriate manner.
Right.
So nothing necessarily triggers it, but anything could.
Right.
A default, actually making your payments, all of that could trigger the audit. So just kind of going back, double checking, taking a look at the bank statements. I think most of us wanted to use the funds in the right manner.
Yeah.
I think most of us did.
Yeah.
But for those of us who might not have, we need to consider how could that then impact a potential bankruptcy.
Right. Now, obviously, there's always the concern of potential legal action. If the party opts not to file for bankruptcy for whatever reason, but they fail to repay, is that something that they could risk?
Absolutely. So the creditor is going to want their money one way or another. And what usually happens then, if neither of those bankruptcy options are for you, the creditor, if you're failing to pay, is going to file a lawsuit against you. Whether you have defenses, whether there's any other legal challenges you have, that could potentially prevent a judgment. But at the end of the day, if the creditor gets a judgment, whether it's the SBA, whether it's the business credit card, American Express, whether it's another creditor, Cabbage, BHG, any of those who are lending, what they get a judgment, then they can start collection actions. And collection actions is where things get really scary for businesses. That could mean freezing the business bank account.
Ooh, yeah.
Now, are you able to make payroll? Probably not with a frozen bank account.
Right.
Are you going to be able to pay yourself, pay your vendors if you've got inventory coming in? And it's just this bad snowball down the hill of all the other problems it causes. If you're a business that owns vehicles, can they start repossessing vehicles? Can they repossess your business assets?
Wow.
It could just be a very scary place. And we talk to our clients a lot about, do you want to be proactive and take that step and make sure you know what you're doing in terms of being in control of this situation? Or are you going to be reactive, waiting for the shoe to drop, trying to figure out which asset is in the biggest danger?
Exactly. And that's a great point, because I'm probably jumping a little bit ahead, but where would you recommend the point that the business say, I need to call a bankruptcy attorney? Would it be after the judgment's already been entered, or when they're starting to realize?
Please don't wait that long. No.
That I don't think I can make these payments, right?
I think it's smart to meet with a bankruptcy attorney at any point in time where you are juggling a lot of debt. Nobody takes a look at their business account and says, I love paying debt. I'm good with all of this.
Yeah.
Right. So I think if you're at a point where you have some debt and you're trying to figure out which one's weighing me down the most, what are my options? Let's have a discussion.
When you're having that conversation with yourself, it's probably time.
When you're figuring, how many bills did I have to pay this month? I have to pay this bill again. Didn't I just pay it? That's a great time to sit down with me and say,
sounds like me all the time.
did I not just pay Discover last week? That's a good time to meet with a bankruptcy attorney. I think if you're waiting until after the judgment hits, I think you're giving me very little time to make choices. And now we're kind of backed into a corner. Right. Are we able
Your
to
options
look?
Are going to be a lot less, right?
A lot limited. And we can take a look and say, okay, here's the big picture. Let me sleep on it. Let me think about it. But if a judgment's already come down, we might be super limited.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a great time just to take a short break. We are rocking and rolling, folks, talking about the SBA loans, the EIDL loans, the fact that it's time to pay up on those. And a lot of businesses are struggling right now. So this is a good topic. I think if you, again, you know, a business owner, someone in your family, friends who could potentially be dealing with this situation, definitely have them tune in, have them give us a call. We have Christina Faher, who is a business bankruptcy attorney. She's here on the line and able to answer your questions and comments. The lines are open. It is 727-441-3000. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back, give you guys time to call or comment, and then we will talk a little bit more about business bankruptcy.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
With FLA Law live on the radio, and hopefully you've been tuned in since 5 o'clock. But if you are just joining us, then you're obviously in for a treat because we are here with our live legal call-in talk show. And we have our special guest, attorney Christina Faher, and she's been talking to us tonight about business bankruptcy. She is a bankruptcy and family law attorney. And we have been talking a bit about these SBA loans, these EIDL loans that a lot of businesses took out during the COVID time. But of course, we're now seeing the repayment issues that are coming up, especially in our area, being significantly impacted by 2 natural disasters. And so she's giving you your choices and your options and things that you can do as business owners if you're starting to feel that pinch. And so earlier we talked about the 2 different options, whether it's Chapter 7 and Chapter 11. But now we're going to get into the concern or the scare that can come with personal liability or just being impacted individually as the business owner. So obviously we've been talking more about the business in terms of how the business can reorganize or liquidate. But the actual owners, the people behind the businesses, do they have personal liability when it comes to these types of loans that we've been talking about?
Most of the time, the answer is yes, Jacqueline. And here's why. When we first open a business, we're happy, we're excited, everything's going to go great. So we sign all the papers, we sign on the dotted line, and we don't really read the papers because most of us are not lawyers. Right. So the lawyers who are listening are cringing. You know, we always read the fine print and we know we're signing to be personal guarantees or guarantors on these debts. And so the hard part is you can file bankruptcy for your business, but that just removes the business's liability on these debts.
Right.
If you personally guaranteed these loans or co-signed on these loans, that means all of the liability has now shifted onto you, the person. Oh. Now we have to consider, how is the person going to pay this? Or does the person also need to consider a personal bankruptcy?
Yeah.
And so that tends to be a little bit easier when you have a one-person business owner and a one-person household.
Okay.
But that's very rare, right? We have spouses to consider. Maybe we have other business owners.
Most people have business partners.
And so that really challenges it. Mm-hmm. If the business has 2 owners and the business files bankruptcy, both the owners are personal guarantors. Now the liabilities on both of them. What if only one individual files? What if the other one doesn't, right? So now there's all these added challenges rather than just what's the business going to do about it.
Yeah. So then is there a way around that? Is that the way these loans are typically structured, that you have to be the personal guarantor?
Depending on how large the loan is or who the lender is, yes, there is usually a personal guarantor. So the SBA with their EIDL loans was the threshold somewhere around 50 to 75,000.
Right.
So if the loan was less than that amount, usually they didn't require a personal guarantor. If it was larger than that amount, yes. But the loan documents, here we go, back to the paper trail.
Yes.
The loan documents that you signed with the SBA, those are going to be telling. That's the one that's going to say, are you a personal guarantor? Are you not?
Yeah.
And so that is really where we want to see that. A lot of times with things like credit cards require a personal guarantor. So that means American Express, even though your business filed bankruptcy and got rid of the Amex debt, American Express can still come after you, the guarantor.
Wow.
And so,
well, tell me, how does that work then? Because if the business gets a discharge from the business side, then how then is the business owner individually not able to say, hey, this has already been discharged?
Well, because the business discharged their liability, right? So think of it like this.
They're off the hook, but
for
not
those
you.
of us for those of you who are watching, we're going to do a little visual, right?
Okay.
So Jacqueline, you're an individual business owner, and I'm the business,
Right.
and we're attached to the creditor. We're holding onto the table. We're responsible, and this table is American Express.
Right.
When the business files bankruptcy, the business gets to let go of the table.
But I'm still holding
And
on.
I'm saying I'm not responsible, but you're right. You're still holding on, which means the business got rid of their liability. They said, I don't have to pay you anymore, Amex.
Right.
But Amex said, but wait, Jacqueline, someone's holding the table still. And so that happens with a lot of debt. And so understanding, are you the personal guarantor? How many people are the personal guarantor? When we get into husbands and wives or spouses owning businesses, if you had your spouse sign a piece of paper, they might be personally liable now too.
Right.
So really opening up
Or
a
if
huge
you've got
can of
several
worms.
business partners, let's say we've got four chairs in here. If two of the chairs release, the other two could still be on the hook.
Yes.
So essentially, if everybody doesn't file for bankruptcy, the ones that don't, oh my goodness.
And now we have to think about, the business being not healthy financially is probably really different than individual owners.
Yeah.
And especially if you have lots of business partners. So maybe they all aren't in a financial position where they need to file bankruptcy, or they don't want to file bankruptcy.
Right.
So now, in addition to having this difficult financial circumstance with the business, now people are fighting, people are getting, it's adding a lot of stress.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question, but I think we're kind of touching on it now, because then how deep could it go into those personal assets? I mean, can things be repossessed and seized and frozen like we were talking about with the business?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Especially if the individuals aren't taking action.
Yeah.
If you're being reactive and waiting to see what an aggressive creditor is going to do, you're going to find your personal bank accounts frozen if they got a judgment against you. If they can then start repossessing your vehicles, they can attach to your stock portfolios. There are a lot of things that a creditor can go after, especially the aggressive ones.
Yeah.
And so you might not know if your creditor is aggressive, but a lot of business bankruptcy attorneys have experience with those who are
know which ones are
a little, a lot of times they say, credit cards usually have to wait 4 months until your last payment before they file suit. And I can give you 3 off the top of my head that at 4 months and 1 day are at the courthouse filing their paperwork. And so if you have assets that could be a concern personally, you want to make sure you're meeting with a bankruptcy attorney to say, how can I protect my assets? Are my assets protected? Or am I going to have a lot of exposure if this all goes south?
Yeah, that's interesting. And so then if a person, because you brought up a good point, and I don't know that it matters, but if a person says, well, I don't really have any assets, I don't have much that they can go after, then should they still be concerned?
Well, that's a very valid question. So there are people that we label judgment proof, right? So you could file that piece of paper, you could get a judgment against me, but you can't collect against it. And so that is generally, in my line of work, I see that with people who are on Social Security or some kind of disability, something that can't be garnished against. Maybe they're renting a home, so they don't own an asset. Maybe their car is 17 years old, so there's not a lot of value there. And maybe they just have a really small bank account. So they might not have a lot of assets. But kind of going back to your previous question, Jacqueline, if you have a lot of personal exposure, that could be the reason why you choose to put your business in a Chapter 11 and reorganize to maybe pay off as much of the debt as you can, rather than file a Chapter 7 on the business, close it up, and then throw the liability onto the individuals and kind of cross your fingers and hope it all works out.
Right. Now, going back to what we were talking about these SBA loans, have you seen that the SBA is one of these aggressive creditors?
I wouldn't call them aggressive.
Okay.
I would call them persistent.
Okay.
Right? They are not going away. They are, they're going to follow up. They're going to be persistent. They're not afraid to file a lawsuit. But I also find that they're workable. Right? I mean, we also have to realize, as much as I do, I defend debtors and people who are in bad situations, they gave us money and we need to give them money back. And many creditors, their language is money. So they want to know how much money, how soon am I going to get the money? How often will I get the money? So if you're going to negotiate with them, have a conversation with them, we need to come up with the plan of what that money's going to look like.
So typically, what kinds of plans can you create to keep your clients out of the hot seat then?
Yeah. So one of the things in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is the payment is essentially structured on what a business's disposable income is. We use disposable income in the bankruptcy world. Businesses probably use net income, right? So after you pay your regular expenses, you pay taxes, you pay payroll, you pay rent, you pay utilities. After that, how much money is left over? Out of that, we need to put that money towards paying creditors. The difficult part is outside of bankruptcy, maybe all of those numbers, all those minimum payments add up to more than how much you have available. And so bankruptcy really helps to say, if this is how much I have left over, this is my net income, this is what I'm going to pay to the creditors, and I don't have to pay more. So that's a good way to say, listen, everybody, hey, all my creditors, this is my pot of money. This is what you all will share in. And then the bankruptcy plan says who gets how much of that amount. So it kind of changes what your minimum payment conversation is. And especially for those who add up all their minimum payments and say, I'm never going to pay this off. That's why Chapter 11 could be a good option for you.
I gotcha. Now, going back to something you said earlier, and I probably should have asked it back then, but I just thought about it again. You mentioned spouses. So you said if you might have had your spouse sign something and then they can become personally liable. But what if the spouse didn't sign anything, but they're just married to you? That's it. Are they then still potentially on the hook, or is it just by virtue of them signing some sort of personal guarantee?
So if they signed a personal guarantee, they're just as liable. So if they signed the personal guarantee, they never had to step foot in the business. They never had to touch a dollar, touch an invoice, nothing. They're still liable. If they are not on any piece of paper, here's where the lawyer wants the paper again. If they're not on a bank statement, they're not on the credit card statement, they're not on the SBA loan, then if they're not connected on anything, then what we call them in the bankruptcy is spouse. They don't have a name. So we don't list them. We don't list them by name. We don't ask a name. They are spouse. And so it's possible that an individual business owner could go through a business bankruptcy, could go through an individual bankruptcy, and it would not affect the other spouse, provided they don't have joint debts. It's when they start having joint debts, like a mortgage or a car loan, that they could be affected. And I always say could. asterisk
Right.
because it really depends on
Well, if you're on it together, then I guess
if you're on it together,
like
but if you're on the mortgage together, but you're going to keep the house, and if you're on the car loan together, we're going to keep the car, then maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
But that's, again, just another good reason why it's great conversation to have with the bankruptcy attorney to really see how far the exposure goes. Because we're going to want to see the title, the registration, the mortgage statement, the IRS loan paperwork, the SBA agreement. We're going to want to see all of that so we can double check and make sure, are there guarantors? Who are the guarantors and who's responsible? Can really make or change the entire conversation.
Yeah. So obviously I know that you're a bankruptcy attorney. And so typically you're getting involved in the aspect when the business is already formed, they've already signed these documents, and now they're coming to you when there's trouble, essentially, for lack of a better word, or there's a pinch. Is there something that you're aware of that can be done before that happens to say, hey, we know that we need this loan, we're going to take out this loan, but there's something that we're going to put in place that could maybe shield us personally from that kind of potential problem in terms of personal liability on the actual business owners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I would probably, if I am a business owner and I'm thinking I'm going to undertake big financing, I think that's a great time to pull in the business attorney, the CPA or accountant, and then the bankruptcy attorney.
Yeah.
And I think that for some people that's weird, right? Why are we bringing in the bankruptcy attorney when things are good, right?
Well, that's just like talking about a prenup before you get married. Yeah.
Yes. You'd rather have this
Think about it early. Yeah.
You'd rather have this piece of paper that does nothing but collect dust,
Yes.
right? So when you think about financing, having those professionals in the room, they're all going to talk about something different, but keep the big picture together. You know, the CPA is thinking about your tax advice, the business lawyer's thinking about the liability, the bankruptcy attorney's thinking about when things go south, right? And so I think a big thought that I have is, where is the financing coming from? We want to see, can we avoid those aggressive creditors? Can we get terms that are favorable? What are we willing to put up as collateral? If anything, does the business have anything we're willing to put up as collateral? So we can have those conversations to put a good plan in place, but that's going to require, you're going to have to pay for that. That's a lot of attorneys. That's a lot of professionals in one room giving advice. But that advice on the front end is going to be much cheaper than fixing the problem on the back end.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive, I think.
And sometimes it's hard for businesses. You see, hey, I could get $250,000. And then we all just kind of see green and we don't really think about what that's going to mean in the long term. We're happy to sign on the dotted line. And then, like you said, I get to see them when things are not great. And sometimes I feel a little bit like the Grim Reaper, Jacqueline. I don't come in with good news.
Yeah. That's a hard role to play, that's for sure. But like you said, it's all rosy and good in the beginning, but you don't anticipate things like this, natural disasters and all kinds of negative impacts that can occur to your business. And you want to be able to know, how do I take the proper steps early on? So I think that's great advice. Bring in all the right people in the beginning.
And I think one of my favorite sayings has always been, people don't plan to fail.
Right.
People fail to plan.
Yeah.
And spending the money, having the right professionals in place, even if we all agree with you and say, yes, it shows that we thought through it. We took all the risk factors into consideration. We made the best decision for this business at this time with the information we had.
Right.
That's invaluable.
So before, obviously, we're kind of winding down here, but I want to go back to what you told us in the very beginning. There's the two options. There's Chapter 7 and there's Chapter 11, right?
Yes.
I could be totally off on this, but I remember when it came to individual bankruptcy, there's some that can have a greater impact on what you're able to do in the future. So with a business, when it comes to filing for business bankruptcy and then wanting to start over or reorganize and still be able to get credit in the future.
Funding. Yeah.
How does that play out? Is there one better than the other? Or,
No. So businesses have their own credit scores.
Mm-hmm.
They're not published. You're not going to see it on Credit Karma or anything like
Sure.
that, but it exists. And a lot of times credit scores are just kind of, the wizard behind the screen, right?
Yeah.
We don't know where it exists, but when you go get financing, banks, lenders, they run your business credit score. So if your business files bankruptcy, then your business's credit score is going to be impacted.
Yeah.
Just like any place else, there are lenders out there who do lend to businesses who've gone through a bankruptcy. And it's very possible that once your business gets out of bankruptcy and reorganizes in a Chapter 11, you could get financing as long as you take the steps to remain healthy, viable. You're going to get another credit card. Are you going to use it in the right manner? Are you going to be able to pay it off? All of the things that we talk about with individual credit scores are also important to business credit.
Yeah.
Paying your bills on time, paying the loan or paying the bill in full each month. All of those things can really make your business credit score improve coming out of the Chapter 11. With the Chapter 7, when you file the bankruptcy, you shut that business down, that business and that credit score dies with it. So then your new business would then have 0 credit score and you'd have to start up again, just like we did when we got our first credit cards.
Yeah. So then, for lack of sounding ignorant, what stops businesses then from just shutting down, starting over, shutting down, starting over, shutting down, starting over when they get a clean slate, and they can just start a new business?
And they can. Yeah. And, a lot of times it depends on what your business does, right? When I counsel with clients and they say, my business is me, my phone, and my laptop.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping you from shutting this business down and starting a new business. It's when you have all the debt, all the assets, maybe you're leasing a piece of equipment, you've got that other stuff to and so a bankruptcy really kind of deals with it all in one place.
Yeah.
Just here's this, we're going to get rid of all of it. Somebody else deal with it.
So is there ever a time where you would say, do not just go into default and let it go? I think it's, you probably kind of just answer that. So I feel like there could be this sole business owner who's just like, this business is just me. I've got nothing. I've racked up quite a bit of debt. I'm just going to default on that. Go away and start a new LLC or something like that. And
that's possible. The question I would want to make sure is, does that individual business owner have any personal liability on the debt? Because if one of those debts that they just defaulted on is an American Express card, chances are he's a personal guarantor. So unless he files his personal bankruptcy, American Express is going to come after him. But if he does file personal bankruptcy, gets rid of the American Express debt, he's free to go and open a new business and do that.
Right. Christina, you've covered so much in a short period of time.
I can't believe our time's over.
It goes by so fast, doesn't it?
Fast.
But I promised I would try to give you time at the end to once again let folks know if they've been listening. We've got a couple viewers right now on Facebook.
Hi, viewers.
If you have questions, you have a business, you're not sure where to go and what to do, please, Christina, give them the info on how to reach you. It's obviously not something that we do at Perenich Caulfield, so we want them to be in good hands.
Excellent. You can reach us at 727-359-0367. You can follow our Facebook, our LinkedIn, our Pinterest, our YouTube channel. Our website is
Pinterest.
We have a Pinterest. We've got really great saving money tips and holiday tips.
Cool.
You're going to love it. We also, our website is feherlaw.com, F like Frank, EHERLAW.com.
Well, thank you so much. As always, you've been an excellent guest. I can't wait to have you back again on FLA Law, live on the radio. As you know, we are here every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Again, we are celebrating our 70th year in business. Thank you all to our clients and those that are watching. Come back, listen again next Tuesday at 5 o'clock with FLA Law, live on the radio.